everybody. Welcome back to CV Freaks podcast. I'm your host, Eden Gray, aka Dr. Chelsea Bruno. This is episode 22, and my special guest today is Eric Schlappi of Schlappi Engineering. Hello, Eric. How are you today?
Hey Chelsea, I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to have you as my guest. I'm excited to be back doing the podcast because your modules are so amazing, and I'm just curious about learning more about them and your background and your music and stuff like that. So um I recently just watched your performance from 2019, the modular on the spot at Seattle. It looked amazing and it sounded great. So what were your musical influences and when did you start the module design?
Um, let's see. I think I've always kind of bounced between metal and more electronic things. Like I think I kind of discovered like metal and industrial around the same time in the 90s. So like the Wipeout Excel soundtrack with uh Future Sound of London and the Prodigy on it at the same time as like Slayer and um, Obituary and all that good stuff. Um, and I think I kind of another big influence for me musically is in the 2000s, I lived in New York and went to noise rock shows pretty much every night and saw a lot of Lightning Bolt and Deerhoof and bands like that. I don't know if you remember the two-person noise rock bands,
That's
but
awesome.
so all that stuff is a big influence on me. I've pretty much always been into synthesizers. I even as a teenager, I worked in synthesizer stores and tried to build synthesizers. They didn't really start to work until I got my electrical engineering degree, and I think I got into Eurorack after seeing the oh that 4 hour documentary that came out.
I dream of wires.
I Dream of Wires. That's it. Like I kind of knew it was always inevitable. Like I'd played with modular since before then, but once that came out, it was kind of like okay, it's time.
And
Um,
2018 was your first super booth year, right?
yeah, yeah. I think I first went to NobCon in 2016 with a prototype of the Interstellar Radio. I think I released the Interstellar Radio in the 2017, and first Super Booth was 2018.
And where was your electrical engineering degree from?
City College of New York in Harlem and New York City.
So that really helped you like come up with your designs. Recently I've been messing with the three body because I'm going to write the review about it for Beat for you.
Mhm.
And I mean, you already have some great reviews. I've been looking at the others, and the knobs are just, yeah, it's very analog feeling interface, but it's digital. It's a FPGA.
Yeah, yeah. I for a long time, like I would play music using vintage monosynths, and like I was definitely one of those like all analog all the time people, but like if you're gonna be an engineer, you need to like you can't just say analog is good, digital is bad. You have to qualify things and try to figure out why. Um, uh, but I know the things that I like are traditionally like analog monosynths. And I tried to make something that felt like that, um, but uh, and had the same sort of features you would have on a classic analog module, but having several features that were really um, not impossible to implement in analog, but generally impractical, like true phase modulation and ratio based through zero FM, and just exploring the ratios and having oscillators tracking each other is something I was really interested in. And the FPGA is it's digital, but it doesn't have a microcontroller. It doesn't have a CPU, and in some sense, it doesn't have like a digital brain that takes like commands and does things in order. It's like you instantiate logic on a chip, which allows it to do really fast, really simple things. So the internal sample rate of that is 12 megahertz, which I did to as sort of a brute force approach, hypothesizing that one of the things I uh, traditionally have found weak about digital synths is the audio rate modulation, because usually your sample rate, or often, maybe not so much anymore, but often your sample rate is 48 kilohertz or 44 kilohertz or something like this. And raising that by 256 times gives you a lot more headroom. For audio rate type effects and nonlinear effects, you really do need to oversample something by a lot, not a little bit. So I think and I think this is actually happening now that computers are getting really powerful, but I think like massive oversampling of audio rate processing is the way to go. Uh, that's probably that was probably more than you were asking for right there, but
Well, it sounds really clean and it doesn't sound as bright as other digital modules I've heard. So, is there a way, how does it end up sounding warmer?
um, I warmer is a difficult term to but the sine waves are really clean. Um, and there's I was finding this like massive oversampling made a lot of difference for how much cross modulation you could have between two oscillators before they totally devolve into noise. At some point they will, if just like big feedback loops eventually will disintegrate. But I think that the extremely high sample rate allows it to go a lot further than most other digital oscillators just sort of filter that out. Um, uh, but I just sort of let you take it all the way until it falls apart, but doing my best to make it so that it falls apart with a much larger amount of cross modulation than most other oscillators would. And I think this helps it sound really organic. I also made a lot of other decisions in there, like um, uh, when you have the two oscillators tracking each other, they're not phase locked. You can phase lock them. There's some header modes, and you can use hard sync to do that as well. But having them track each other really closely, but without being phase locked, means that they act more like analog oscillators because it allows them to drift a bit from each other, not in pitch but in phase. I found this makes a difference and is also nice if you run them in not the ratio locked mode, but the free mode. Uh, and there's a lot of kind of musical decisions I took during that uh, process, like making it so the sine and cosine can be used as a stereo output, which isn't kind of actually breaks the sine cosine relationship, but um, I think is a really interesting effect.
Yeah, that stepped mode, it just sounds something from a dream for me. It's something I've always loved, like that harmonic kind of scale of yeah, just it's very magical. It was so fun to see you at Super Boot this year and Stasma there, demoing your system and all your new module setup, and he was running it really hard and loud and crazy. When did you meet him?
Um, I met him a couple years ago. I was living in Grenoble in France
Right.
for a couple of years, and right when I got up there, I reached out to him, and he invited me to join him at a jam session in the Ardèche, which is kind of a beautiful area in the south of France, and it was pretty incredible.
Wow. It was like a live show?
No, it was just some breakcore musicians hanging out uh, at a kind of an old, uh, I'm forgetting the name for what they call these
Bunker
old
kind of
farmhouses,
old
but
farm. Um, so you just recently released something on a new album with his label? Is
yeah,
what's it called?
this one is called Larval Beak. It's actually a bunch of recordings that I made in France with my friend Bastien Laval, who does Syntony, which is a video modular company. So every song on that actually has a video that goes with it that was made at the same time as the audio, doing just live jamming. And I'm usually feeding him my kick drum envelope and maybe some other synced modulation. So it really meshes together well. And then there's a couple tracks on there. Like the first track has my friend Mauro, who I was playing in a noise rock band with, playing live acoustic drums on it, which is really cool. And it's kind of a strange album. It kind of starts off pretty hardcore, and then by the end, it's goes really melodic and really ambient. Um, but I think it's fun.
Oh, that's great. I love the noise stuff and ambient and how you mix them together. That's kind of like what I do too, a little bit. So, but yeah, we all have it in common. I like visiting the sounds and relating them to my own, and so I'm looking forward to listening to that. Uh,
Awesome.
it was fun. You were always one of the only module manufacturers who would go to the after party, so I called you the last man standing over there because like everyone else is so tired and you have to stand there all day talking about your designs and stuff. So that was fun hanging out there with you after.
Yeah.
Um, and let's see, is there you don't have a sequencer, right? Do you have any kind of new designs coming up?
I do have new designs coming. The thing I've been using is the sequencer in the system recently, is the nibbler and the bitmix, these logic modules. Um, not
Similar to the RCD, the 4MS RCD?
n no.
Is-
Um,
Oh, oops.
the no, I mean, um, well, degrees of similarity. The nibbler is a 4-bit logic module, so it counts in bits. The controls are in binary.
Oh, wow.
Um, you can use it to do clock division similar to something like the RCD, um, but it since I did it all in CMOS logic for some reason, so it's just logic chips, um, and it since it's 4-bit, it can count from 0 to 15, but and if it goes past 15, it overflows. So it's sort of this modulo 16 action, which means you can get these uh, kind of polyrhythms, but all with connected back to a base 4. Um, and it generates stepped voltages as well as gates. So with that, and then the bit mix, which is a 4-channel logic module that allows you to combine these logic signals together to create a new logic signal with like and or XOR, like basic logic functions and switches, so it's playable. I've been using that for the shows I've played this year. I've been using that as my sequencer. No, nothing that's actually um, no pre-recorded or it's just kind of live and generative, uh, which is pretty cool. It's really good for strange hard techno sort of things. It may not be the way everyone wants to sequence everything, but since you can also use it with like my original intent for some of this stuff was to use it to sequence the ratios on the 3-body. And that's nice because it's a quantizer of sorts. So you can use that to generate these sequences that are still in tune if you send it volts per octave. So you can do something like have these strange sequences, but then also play chords or something and do a combination. Um, uh, so logic sequencing, no sequencer, and I've got another module I haven't I haven't done the big announcement yet, but I did have it at Super Booth. Um, the Bitfold we're working on putting into production now, and this is also part of this 4-bit ecosystem. This would be the analog to digital converter of the 4-bit ecosystem. But I use some properties of the binary system to make an unusual wave folder with it. So this one should be a little bit more accessible because you can view it as like a wave folder distortion type effect. But the wave folder also always does sawtooth waves. It kind of sounds more like a classic hard sync effect than it does a wave folder, which is actually pretty nice for to have access to that kind of effect without needing 2 oscillators hard sync together.
That's so cool, the 4-bit ecosystem, because that's totally your concept, right? I've never heard it anywhere else.
No, I mean, it's not entirely, it's a little bit similar to what XAOC are doing with their 8-bit LiveNet system, but it's 4 bits. Like it kind of came from me experimenting with circuit bending the 3-body and directly modifying the circuit bending, not exactly, but like experiments that came from that world, and directly modifying the bits and deciding that 4 bits is enough for this sort of direct um, uh, like if you want something to be really hi-fi, the I think the internal oscillators of the 3-body are 28 bits, and the most since bits actually directly translates to a signal to noise measurement, the most bits that can really be like translated to something you can hear is something like 18 to 24 bits, like because electrons generate heat, physics, like there's in the real world there's a limit to the signal to noise ratio you can achieve. Um, 8 bits is pretty noisy. 4 bits is very noisy, but like I found it's actually pretty musical and it's something that's useful for rhythm as well as audio. Um, so like and my concept, I think it's a little different. Like I haven't actually used the Leibniz system. I would like to do that, but it seems like that really more is a system where it's kind of like a separate modular system from the Eurorack system that needs to be used together. Whereas each of my logic modules so far should all be like, there's no connections behind the thing. They're just, each of them has sort of a dual purpose. Like, so the bitfold you can use as an analog to digital converter and create these really interesting rhythms. You could also use it as a um, frequency multiplier or clock multiplier, but to use it in that way, it needs to have ramps. I'm probably getting too technical, but it it has like a theoretical usage as well as a more basic usage, which would be like a wave folder or distortion. Um, and each of the others kind of have this. I've, this is like a little similar to what I've done in the past, where um, like the nibbler has more basic uses and more theoretical uses, and the 100 grit can be either a wild distortion or like a classic low pass filter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's really innovative, your designs are, and they go so well with everything else. So I'm pretty amazed by them. Um, so I'm gonna check out your album, get to work on this review. This module's already been out 2 years, I think, but the Nibbler is the brand new one, and then the next one you mentioned is which one? Again?
Called the bitfold.
Bitfold, yeah.
It's good. It's another it's only 6 HP, so I could only fit 4 letters on there. So it's BTFLD, but five letters, 5 letters, but pronounced bitfold.
And that's the logic module which you use as a sequencer, sort of.
Well, this one would be more like a wave folder, but if you combine all the logic modules together, you can use them as a really strange sequencer.
Yeah, which is awesome. And then do they generate sound like accidentally if you patch them up weird, they also can generate sound too.
Yeah, they all run at audio rate. So, like the nibbler can be used to generate subharmonics. Um, like you can use it as a frequency divider for any uh, ratio over 16. If that makes sense.
Um, let's see. A ratio over 16.
Yeah, so you can divide your input frequency by 2 over 16, which would be dividing it by 8, or 3 over 16, or 4 over 16, which would be dividing it by 4, or 5 over 16. So it's because it has this modulo action to it, and it's counting in binary. I kind of think that the binary number system is inherently musical because it has these octave, as since it's dealing with powers of 2, this is like octaves. So
Oh yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. So that way it'll make sense musically.
yeah, I know something like a ratio of 3 over 2 is a fifth, if you think in terms of the scale. Um, and all of like most simpler simpler ratios tend to match up either to rhythmic or melodic, like a scale ratio pretty easily.
So you know about theory then. Did you play any traditional instruments?
Yeah, I played drums and guitar and metal bands for a long time, and right now the last maybe 2 years I've been spending a lot of my free time working on learning jazz standards on the piano. Uh,
It's fun.
they've People living with me have had to hear me play Take Five probably 1,000 times in the past year,
Oh my.
but
That's tricky stuff
uh,
though. Yeah. It's hard to learn jazz stuff.
it's yeah, I think it's I think it's fun. I think it's yeah, I like listening to different types of music and then trying to drag it back into my weird modular stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Just it's evolving so much. Just wait till somebody's gonna come out with some type of notation for modular synths, you know. But I don't know. I mean, it's pretty much just a free thing that's open to interpretation. So if you want to make a notation for it, why not? Can be
Yeah,
little symbols, just like traditional music.
yeah. Well, and I like trying to combine them. Um, like if you stick to simpler ratios with the nibbler, you can get rhythms that pretty familiar rhythms that you might recognize. Um, but if you start modulating it, or you'll get into like weird IDM type rhythms, and that's pretty fun in and of itself. But then trying to play instead of just keeping everything abstract, I'm pretty interested in, okay, like now we've got something weird, like let's see if we can play the piano on top of it or play the acoustic drum track with it and see, let's try it. I don't know.
Yeah, so much you can do. So good. Um,
Or yeah.
go on.
Same with melodic ideas, like if you feed a bunch of crazy modulation to an oscillator and you get some sort of insane saxophone thing or whatever that's happening with it, then trying to like, I don't know, somehow contrast that with a more traditional musical element. I think I think this makes it a lot more interesting. Like I'm currently enjoying listening to 60s and 70s jazz, but in general, I think um, the contrast is what makes things interesting. Harsh noise wall is not like harsh noise can be an interesting genre, especially live, but I think it's more interesting if you can contrast it or use dynamics so that you do have a super harsh noise section, but you also might have a really melodic or section to contrast it with afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I hope I get to see one of your live performances today, someday. And it's gonna be
Yeah.
an interesting road for you as with all your developments. So, okay, well, thank you so much for being my guest today. And well, I guess I'll see you at Super Booth next year. That's all I really do, so that's a long time from now, unfortunately, but
And the only other thing I have on my calendar is Machina Bristronica. Don't know if you're
oh, yes,
going
that
to the
looks like a good
UK
one.
again,
I wish.
but
Maybe one year I'll make it back for that. Yeah, that looks like a really
yeah,
fun one. And that's in September, right?
yep. October, but that's coming up soon.
Oh, and Synthfest is also in October, right? In
I
Sheffield.
have not, yeah, I've never been to that one.
It's really far. So if you were in Bristol and then Sheffield, it's I think 4 hours or something, maybe more. Yeah, but what a fun place. Yeah, it's great in the UK. Did you go to Bristonica before then?
Yeah, I went last year and I had a lot of fun. And seemed, yeah, so I wanted, this year they've actually got me doing a talk or question and answer session about distortion, so that should be neat as well.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Hope I can catch a stream of that somewhere. It's so interesting
Yeah,
to me. Okay, well, all right. Well, have a good day and thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us.
great. Thank you so much.